In a small, quiet village surrounded by towering mountains and dense forests, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The air was crisp, especially during the winter months when snow blanketed the ground, turning the landscape into a pristine, white canvas. Nestled on the outskirts of this village stood an old, weathered orphanage. Its wooden walls creaked with age, and its windows were often fogged up from the cold. Inside lived 15 orphans, ranging in age from 6 to 16. They were a lively bunch, full of energy and curiosity, always finding ways to make the most of their simple lives. Their caretaker, Sister Marguerite, was a gentle woman in her late 50s with silver hair tied neatly in a bun. She had dedicated her life to these children, treating them as if they were her own. The orphanage wasn't luxurious by any means. There were no fancy toys or modern appliances, just basic necessities like warm clothes, simple meals, and a roof over their heads. But what the place lacked in material comforts, it made up for in warmth and love. The children shared chores, played games together, and looked out for one another. Despite their hardships, they formed a tight-knit family bound by shared experiences and mutual support. One chilly December morning, the sun barely peeked through the thick clouds hanging over the mountains. The temperature had dropped overnight, and the frost clung stubbornly to every surface. Sister Marguerite gathered the children in the main hall after breakfast. "We're running low on firewood," she announced, her voice calm but firm. "I need some of you to go into the forest and gather more before the storm hits." Winter storms in this part of the world were notorious for their ferocity, and everyone knew how dangerous it could be to get caught outside unprepared. Without hesitation, all 15 children volunteered. It wasn't unusual for them to take trips into the nearby woods. They'd done it countless times before. The older ones knew the trails well, and even the younger ones felt confident following along. After bundling up in layers of woolen sweaters, scarves, and mittens, they set off cheerfully, carrying baskets and sacks to collect wood. Laughter echoed through the crisp air as they trudged through the snow, their boots crunching softly beneath them. At first, everything seemed normal. The children split into smaller groups, each heading in different directions to cover more ground. Some stayed close to the edge of the forest, while others ventured deeper, lured by the promise of larger, fallen branches. Hours passed, and the sky grew darker as heavy clouds rolled in, signaling the approach of the storm. One by one, the groups began making their way back to the meeting point, a large oak tree near the entrance of the forest where they had agreed to regroup. But not everyone returned. By late afternoon, panic started to set in. Only 8 children came back, their faces pale with worry. "They said they'd meet us here," cried Anna, a 12-year-old girl clutching her basket tightly. "We waited as long as we could, but the wind got too strong and we had to come back." Sister Marguerite's heart sank. 7 children were still missing. Without wasting a moment, she organized a search party. Villagers armed with lanterns and ropes scoured the forest, calling out the names of the missing children. The storm arrived sooner than expected, bringing blinding snow and biting winds that made visibility nearly impossible. For hours they searched tirelessly, but there was no sign of the children. By the time they were forced to retreat, exhaustion and despair weighed heavily on everyone. The next day, as dawn broke over the frozen landscape, the search resumed with renewed urgency. This time, local authorities joined the effort, bringing trained dogs and specialized equipment. Helicopters circled above the mountains, scanning the vast expanse below. Yet, despite their best efforts, the children remained elusive. Days turned into weeks and hope dwindled with each passing moment. The only clue found was a single red scarf snagged on a low-hanging branch near the edge of the forest. It belonged to Mia, a 9-year-old known for her bright smile and adventurous spirit. Holding the scarf in trembling hands, Sister Marguerite fought back tears, praying silently for a miracle. As news of the disappearance spread beyond the village, theories began to emerge. Some speculated that the children had wandered too far and fallen victim to wild animals lurking in the wilderness. Others whispered about the supernatural, pointing to old legends about spirits haunting the mountains. These tales spoke of travelers who vanished without a trace, their fates forever shrouded in mystery. While many dismissed such stories as mere superstition, they added an eerie undertone to the tragedy, leaving villagers uneasy. Despite the lack of answers, life in the village continued, or at least tried to. But the absence of the children left a void that couldn't be filled. Meals prepared at the orphanage felt emptier, laughter quieter, and nights lonelier. Sister Marguerite spent countless hours staring out the window, hoping against hope that she would see familiar faces returning down the snowy path. Her faith, once unwavering, was tested like never before. Still, she refused to give up. Every evening she lit candles in the chapel and prayed for guidance, clinging to the belief that the truth would eventually come to light. Meanwhile, the village itself began to change. Families who had lived there for generations started moving away, unable to bear the weight of unanswered questions and lingering grief. Those who stayed carried the burden silently, their smiles tinged with sadness. Visitors became scarce, deterred by rumors of the cursed mountains. Over time, the vibrant community transformed into a somber ghost town, its streets empty and its houses abandoned. Yet, amidst the sorrow, a faint glimmer of hope persisted. Somewhere out there, perhaps buried under layers of snow or hidden within the depths of the forest, lay the key to unraveling the mystery. Though 20 years would pass before anyone stumbled upon it, the story of the 15 orphans refused to fade completely. Instead, it lingered in the hearts and minds of those connected to it, waiting patiently for the day when the truth would finally emerge. The years that followed the disappearance of the 15 orphans were marked by a deep, unshakable sadness that settled over the village like a thick fog. The once vibrant community, known for its lively festivals and close-knit families, began to crumble under the weight of unanswered questions and unresolved grief. The orphanage, once filled with laughter and chatter, stood abandoned, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in ivy. It became a haunting reminder of what had been lost, a place where joy had turned to silence and hope had faded into despair. Sister Marguerite, now an elderly woman with silver hair streaked with gray, remained in the village despite the exodus of others. She refused to leave, clinging to the belief that one day she would uncover the truth about the children. Her days were spent in quiet reflection, poring over old photographs, letters, and journals written by the orphans before they vanished. Each page brought back memories of their smiles, their jokes, their dreams, and each memory fueled her determination to find answers. But as time passed, the burden of not knowing grew heavier, weighing on her heart like a stone. The villagers who stayed behind carried their own scars. Parents who had sent their own children to play with the orphans now avoided the forest altogether, warning younger generations to stay away from the mountains. The trails where the children had last been seen became overgrown with weeds and thorns, as if nature itself was trying to erase any trace of the tragedy. Yet even as the physical reminders faded, the stories lived on. Around campfires on cold winter nights, elders whispered tales of ghostly figures spotted in the woods, shadowy shapes moving between trees, faint laughter echoing through the stillness, and the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow when no one else was around. These stories, half believed and half feared, became part of the village's folklore. Visitors passing through the area often heard them recounted in hushed tones, adding to the air of mystery surrounding the mountains. Some dismissed the tales as mere superstition, while others listened with wide eyes, wondering if there was any truth to them. A few brave souls ventured into the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the supernatural phenomena described in the stories. None ever returned with concrete evidence, but many claimed to have felt an inexplicable chill, or seen fleeting movements out of the corner of their eye. For Sister Marguerite, the rumors only deepened her anguish. She couldn't bring herself to believe that the children had become ghosts, wandering aimlessly in the wilderness. To her, they were still alive in spirit, if not in body, and deserved closure. Every year, on the anniversary of their disappearance, she organized a small memorial service at the edge of the forest, Villagers gathered to light candles, say prayers, and share memories of the missing children. Though fewer people attended, with each passing year those who came did so out of respect for Sister Marguerite and the hope that their presence might somehow help bring peace to the restless souls. Despite her efforts, Sister Marguerite often found herself consumed by doubt. What if the children hadn't survived? What if they had succumbed to the harsh elements within hours of getting lost? These thoughts haunted her, especially during long, sleepless nights when the wind howled outside her window. She tried to push them aside, reminding herself of their resilience and resourcefulness. After all, they had faced challenges before: hunger, illness, loneliness, and had always managed to pull through together. Surely they would have done everything in their power to survive. But as the decades passed, even her faith began to waver. The world moved on, leaving the village behind. New roads were built, connecting distant towns and cities, but none led to this forgotten corner of the mountains. Tourists occasionally stopped by, curious about the abandoned orphanage and the tragic tale associated with it, but most left quickly, unnerved by the eerie atmosphere. For those who remained, life became a monotonous cycle of survival. The fields were tilled, crops harvested, and winters endured. But there was little joy in any of it. Amidst this gloom, however, seeds of curiosity began to sprout. Younger generations, raised on the stories of the missing orphans, started asking questions their parents had long avoided. Why had the search been called off so soon? Could modern technology reveal clues that earlier methods had missed? These inquiries reignited a flicker of interest in solving the mystery, though it was tempered by skepticism. Many believed the case was too old, the trail too cold to yield any meaningful answers. It wasn't until a young journalist named Clara arrived in the village that things began to shift. Clara had grown up hearing about the orphan's disappearance from her grandmother, who had lived in the village at the time. Determined to uncover the truth, she spent months interviewing villagers, sifting through archives, and exploring the forest herself. Her arrival stirred mixed emotions among the locals. Some welcomed her enthusiasm, seeing it as a chance to finally lay the past to rest. Others viewed her efforts with suspicion, fearing that reopening old wounds would only cause more pain. Clara's persistence paid off when she discovered a box of letters hidden in the attic of the orphanage. Written by the children themselves, these letters offered glimpses into their lives before they vanished, their hopes, fears, and dreams. One letter, penned by Mia, the girl whose scarf had been found snagged on a tree branch, stood out. "I'm scared sometimes," she had written, "but I know we'll be okay because we have each other." Reading those words brought tears to Clara's eyes. They painted a picture of innocence and courage, qualities that made their fate all the more heartbreaking. As Clara shared her findings with the villagers, a renewed sense of purpose took hold. Perhaps the truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. Perhaps the children's story didn't end with their disappearance. This glimmer of hope, however faint, was enough to keep the flame of curiosity burning. And though no one could predict what the future held, one thing was certain: the legacy of the 15 orphans would never be forgotten. Their names continued to echo through the mountains, carried by the wind and whispered by those who dared to dream of finding answers. 2 decades after the mysterious disappearance of the 15 orphans, the mountains that had once swallowed them whole remained as enigmatic and foreboding as ever. The village below had grown quieter with each passing year, its population dwindling to a handful of families who refused or were too rooted to leave. Life there seemed suspended in time, frozen between grief and resignation. But far from this quiet corner of the world, a young woman named Elena was about to stumble upon something that would reignite interest in the long-forgotten tragedy. Elena Martinez was a geologist in her late 20s, driven by an insatiable curiosity for the natural world. Her fascination with rocks and minerals had begun as a child when she spent hours collecting pebbles along riverbanks near her home. Now, years later, she traveled across the globe studying unique geological formations. When she heard about the peculiar rock layers hidden in the remote mountains above the village, she jumped at the chance to explore them, Little did she know that her scientific expedition would lead to one of the most astonishing discoveries of her career, and perhaps her life. Arriving in the village on a crisp autumn morning, Elena was struck by its eerie stillness. The cobblestone streets were empty save for a few elderly residents sitting on benches, their faces lined with age and sorrow. She rented a small cabin near the edge of the forest and began preparing for her journey into the mountains. Armed with maps, climbing gear, and a sense of adventure, she set out early the next day, accompanied only by her thoughts and the rhythmic crunch of her boots against the frosty ground. The climb was grueling but breathtakingly beautiful. Towering pines stretched toward the sky, their needles glinting gold in the sunlight. Streams cascaded down rocky slopes, their waters crystal clear and icy cold. As Elena ascended higher, the air grew thinner, and the temperature dropped sharply. Yet despite the challenges, she felt invigorated, a feeling she always experienced when venturing into uncharted territory. After several hours of hiking, Elena reached a secluded valley tucked deep within the mountains. It was here that she encountered the waterfall, a towering cascade of water plunging into a shallow pool below. Its roar filled the air, drowning out all other sounds. Mesmerized by its beauty, Elena approached cautiously, noticing how the mist clung to her skin like a fine veil. But what caught her attention wasn't just the waterfall itself. It was the dark opening partially concealed behind it. Curiosity got the better of her. Carefully navigating the slippery rocks, Elena stepped closer to investigate. The opening appeared to be the entrance to a cave system, its jagged edges suggesting it had been carved by centuries of erosion. Intrigued, she retrieved her flashlight and ventured inside, her heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. At first, the cave seemed ordinary, damp walls glistening with moisture, stalactites hanging low from the ceiling, and the faint sound of dripping water echoing through the narrow passageways. But as Elena pressed deeper, she began to notice signs of human activity. Scattered across the floor were fragments of pottery, scraps of fabric, and pieces of charred wood, remnants of fires long extinguished. Her breath caught in her throat as realization dawned. Someone had lived here, and not recently. Exploring further, Elena discovered crude carvings etched into the stone walls. They depicted scenes of daily life, people gathering food, building shelters, and huddling together around fires. Some images showed children playing, their stick figure forms dancing joyfully across the surface. Others were more somber, depicting figures lying down or being carried away. Each carving told a story, offering glimpses into the lives of those who had once called this place home. But it was what Elena found next that left her speechless. In a larger chamber deeper within the cave, she shone her flashlight on a section of the wall covered in writing. At first glance, it looked like random scratches, but upon closer inspection, she realized they were initials, names carved carefully into the stone. There were 15 sets in total, each accompanied by a date spanning several years. And then it hit her. These names matched those of the missing orphans. Her hands trembled as she traced the letters with her fingers. How was this possible? Everyone had assumed the children had perished shortly after disappearing, yet here was evidence suggesting they had survived for months, maybe even years. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of her discovery, Elena sat down on the cold, uneven floor, trying to process what she had uncovered. She continued exploring the cave, finding more artifacts that painted a clearer picture of the children's ordeal. There were makeshift tools fashioned from rocks and branches, dried food stores wrapped in leaves, and even rudimentary paintings adorning the walls. One particularly striking image showed a group of figures standing hand in hand beneath a starry sky, their faces tilted upward as if gazing at something beyond reach. It was both haunting and beautiful, evoking a sense of unity and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. As the hours passed, Elena documented everything meticulously, snapping photographs and jotting notes in her journal. By the time she emerged from the cave, the sun was setting, casting the valley in hues of orange and pink. Exhausted but exhilarated, she made her way back to the village, her mind racing with questions. Who had helped the children survive? Why hadn't they tried to escape? And what had ultimately become of them? When Elena shared her findings with the villagers, disbelief quickly gave way to astonishment. Word spread rapidly, drawing journalists, historians, and curious outsiders to the area. For the first time in decades, the village buzzed with activity. Teams of experts descended upon the mountains, eager to examine the cave system and piece together the puzzle of the orphans' fate. Among those most affected by the discovery was Sister Marguerite, now frail and bedridden. Though her body had weakened with age, her spirit remained strong. When Elena visited her to share the news, tears streamed down the old woman's face as she listened intently. "They were alive," she whispered, clutching the photograph of the smiling children she had kept close all these years. They fought so hard. For the villagers, the revelation brought a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and wonder. While the mystery of the orphans' disappearance was far from solved, the discovery offered a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the truth was finally within reach, buried deep within the mountains that had guarded their secret for so long. And though the answers might be painful, they promised closure, a chance to honor the memory of the 15 children who had endured unimaginable challenges with courage and grace. The discovery of the hidden cave system sent shockwaves through the village and beyond. What had once been a tragic mystery shrouded in whispers and folklore suddenly became a tangible, real-life puzzle waiting to be solved. The news spread like wildfire, drawing experts from various fields, archaeologists, historians, forensic scientists, and even psychologists, to the remote mountain region. Each person brought their own expertise, hoping to piece together the story of the 15 orphans whose names were carved into the walls of the ancient cavern. Elena, the geologist who had first stumbled upon the cave, found herself at the center of this whirlwind of activity. Though she was no expert in human history or behavior, her role as the discoverer made her an invaluable guide for the teams exploring the site. She led them through the labyrinthine tunnels, pointing out key artifacts and explaining how she had uncovered each clue. Her initial awe at finding the cave had transformed into a deep sense of responsibility. These weren't just relics of the past. They were fragments of lives that deserved to be understood and remembered. As the investigation unfolded, the cave revealed more of its secrets. Forensic specialists carefully examined the skeletal remains found scattered throughout the chambers. The bones told a grim but fascinating story. Many of the children had likely succumbed to malnutrition, exposure, and illness over time. Some showed signs of fractures and injuries, suggesting accidents or struggles during their years in the wilderness. Yet, despite the hardships they endured, there was evidence of care and cooperation among them. For example, makeshift splints crafted from branches indicated attempts to treat broken limbs, and shared food stores hinted at a collective effort to survive. One particularly poignant artifact was a collection of handwritten notes tucked into crevices in the rock walls. Written on scraps of paper, bark, and even smooth stones, these messages provided glimpses into the children's thoughts and emotions. Some entries were practical, detailing plans for gathering firewood or rationing supplies. Others were deeply personal, expressing fears, hopes, and dreams. One note, written by Anna, a 12-year-old girl, read, "I miss Sister Marguerite. I hope she knows we tried our best." Another, penned by Thomas, one of the older boys, said simply, "We will stay strong for each other." These writings painted a vivid picture of resilience and solidarity. Despite being stranded in a harsh environment with limited resources, the children had banded together, relying on their ingenuity and mutual support to endure. They created tools from whatever materials they could find, built shelters within the cave to protect themselves from the elements, and developed routines to maintain a sense of normalcy. It was clear that they had formed a tight-knit community, bound not only by necessity but also by love and loyalty. However, not all the discoveries were heartwarming. Among the artifacts were traces of toxic plants, suggesting that some of the children may have accidentally consumed poisonous vegetation while foraging for food. This revelation added another layer of tragedy to their story, highlighting the constant dangers they faced. Additionally, researchers noted signs of ritualistic behavior in the cave art and carvings. Certain symbols appeared repeatedly, often accompanied by dates or markings resembling calendars. Some speculated that the children might have developed their own belief system, a way to cope with their isolation and make sense of their predicament. Psychologists who studied the findings offered insights into the psychological toll such an ordeal would have taken, being cut off from the outside world, unsure if anyone was searching for them, and facing the daily threat of starvation or injury would have tested their mental fortitude. Yet remarkably, the children seemed to have found ways to preserve their humanity. Games played with pebbles and sticks, songs etched onto the walls in musical notation, and drawings of animals and landscapes suggested moments of joy and creativity amid the struggle. Back in the village, Sister Marguerite listened intently as Elena and other investigators shared updates about the ongoing exploration. Though her body was frail, her mind remained sharp, and she absorbed every detail with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. She recognized the names in the notes and carvings, recalling each child's personality, their quirks, strengths, and vulnerabilities. Holding a photograph of the group, she whispered their names aloud, as if calling them back to life. For the villagers, the revelations brought a mix of emotions. On one hand, learning that the children had survived far longer than anyone imagined was a testament to their courage and determination. On the other hand, knowing the extent of their suffering was heartbreaking. Conversations around dinner tables and campfires turned to questions about why they hadn't attempted to signal for help or leave the cave. Some theorized that fear of the unknown, or perhaps memories of previous failed escape attempts, had kept them anchored to their sanctuary. Others wondered if they had chosen isolation, preferring to stay together rather than risk splitting up or venturing into a world that felt increasingly distant. Despite the sadness, there was also a sense of pride. The children's ability to adapt, innovate, and support one another in the face of unimaginable challenges inspired admiration. Their story became a symbol of resilience, not just for the villagers, but for anyone who heard it. Journalists wrote articles, filmmakers began planning documentaries, and educators incorporated the tale into lessons about survival and teamwork. Yet, amidst the flurry of activity, one question lingered. Why had the children stayed in the cave, instead of seeking rescue? As researchers pieced together the timeline based on the dates carved into the walls, a theory emerged. It seemed the children had initially planned to return to the village but encountered obstacles, perhaps injuries, bad weather, or dwindling strength that forced them to retreat. Over time, the cave became their home, a place where they could control their environment and rely on one another. By the time they realized they might never leave, it may have been too late. This realization added a bittersweet dimension to the discovery. While the children's fate was tragic, their legacy was one of extraordinary bravery and unity. They had turned a desolate cave into a sanctuary, creating a world of their own when the outside world felt unreachable. And though their lives ended prematurely, their story endured, a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the bonds that sustain us in the darkest times. As winter approached and snow began to blanket the mountains once again, the cave was sealed off temporarily to preserve its contents. Plans were made to convert it into a memorial site, ensuring that future generations would remember the 15 orphans who had defied despair and left behind a legacy of hope. For now, the village and the world waited with bated breath to see what further insights the investigation would reveal. But one thing was certain: the children's voices, long silenced, had finally been heard. As the investigation into the cave deepened, the story of the 15 orphans began to take shape in ways that were both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. Each artifact uncovered, each carving studied, and each note deciphered added layers to a narrative that had been buried for 2 decades. Yet even as answers emerged, new questions arose, leaving experts and villagers alike grappling with the complexities of what had truly happened to these children. One of the most intriguing aspects of the discovery was the apparent transformation of the group's mindset over time. Initially, it seemed clear that the children had intended to return to the village. Their early carvings included hopeful messages like, "We'll go back soon," and "Stay strong until help comes." These words reflected a belief that their situation was temporary, that someone would find them or they would find their way home. But as months turned into years, the tone of their writings shifted. Later entries became more introspective, focusing less on escape and more on survival. One poignant message read, "This is our place now. We are safe here." Researchers interpreted this shift as evidence of adaptation, a psychological process where the children came to accept their circumstances rather than fight against them. For children who had already endured abandonment and hardship before arriving at the orphanage, the idea of creating a new home within the cave may have felt empowering. It allowed them to reclaim control over their lives, however limited that control might have been. The cave wasn't just a shelter, it was a sanctuary, a space where they could build something meaningful out of despair. Yet, this acceptance also raised difficult questions about why they hadn't sought help more aggressively. Some speculated that fear played a role. After wandering so far into the mountains and experiencing the harsh realities of nature, the children may have doubted their ability to survive another journey. Others suggested that injuries or illnesses among the group made travel impossible. Evidence of broken bones and malnutrition supported this theory, indicating that some children were likely too weak to attempt an escape. Another possibility was that the children chose isolation, not out of fear, but out of loyalty to one another. They had formed a tight-knit family in the orphanage, and that bond only grew stronger in the face of adversity. Leaving the cave might have meant splitting up or risking losing members of their group. To them, staying together may have felt like the only option worth pursuing, even if it meant remaining hidden from the outside world. The ritualistic elements found in the cave added another layer of intrigue. Symbols carved into the walls resembled patterns used in ancient cultures to mark significant events or seasons. Researchers hypothesized that the children had developed their own calendar system, using natural markers like the position of sunlight filtering through cracks in the rock to track time. This practice wasn't just practical, it was symbolic, giving structure and meaning to their days. Songs etched onto the walls in musical notation hinted at ceremonies or celebrations held to mark milestones or lift spirits during dark times. Psychologists analyzing the findings noted how such rituals could have provided comfort and stability. In situations of extreme stress, humans often turn to repetitive actions or shared traditions to cope. For the children, these practices may have helped them maintain a sense of identity and purpose, even as their connection to the outside world faded. Drawing pictures of animals, landscapes, and imagined worlds also suggested an effort to preserve their creativity and imagination, traits essential for emotional resilience. Despite these insights, the physical toll of their ordeal was undeniable. Forensic analysis revealed that several children had died relatively early in their stay, likely due to exposure or untreated injuries. Those who survived longer appeared to have done so by pooling resources and sharing responsibilities. Tools fashioned from rocks and branches showed remarkable ingenuity, while food stores wrapped in leaves indicated careful planning. Even so, the scarcity of resources eventually took its toll. Traces of toxic plants suggested accidental poisoning, while signs of malnutrition pointed to dwindling supplies. One particularly moving discovery was a final carving near the deepest part of the cave. Written in large, deliberate letters, it simply said, "We are not afraid. We are home." This message resonated deeply with everyone involved in the investigation. It captured the essence of the children's journey, from fear and uncertainty to acceptance and peace. Though their lives ended tragically, they had managed to create something extraordinary in the face of unimaginable hardship. For Sister Marguerite, learning these details brought a mix of relief and sorrow. She had spent 20 years wondering about the fate of her beloved children, praying for answers that never came. Now, though the truth was painful, it offered closure. Holding a photograph of the smiling faces she had cherished for so long, she wept openly. "They were brave," she murmured, her voice trembling. "They loved each other until the very end." The villagers, too, struggled to reconcile their emotions. On one hand, they felt immense pride in the children's resilience and unity. On the other, The knowledge of their suffering weighed heavily on their hearts. Conversations around campfires and dinner tables turned to reflections on loss and legacy. How could such a tragic story inspire hope? What lessons could be drawn from their experience? Some saw the children's story as a testament to the power of community. Despite being abandoned by society, they had built a family of their own, relying on one another to endure. Others viewed it as a cautionary tale about the importance of vigilance and care, reminding everyone of the responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Still, others found solace in the idea that the children had created beauty and meaning in the darkest of places, a reminder that even in despair, there is light. As winter settled over the mountains once again, plans were finalized. To preserve the cave as a memorial site, artifacts recovered from the chambers were carefully cataloged and displayed in a temporary exhibit set up in the village hall. Visitors came from far and wide to see the tools, notes, and drawings that told the story of the orphans' incredible journey. Journalists wrote articles, filmmakers began documenting the discovery, and educators incorporated the tale into lessons about history, psychology, and human resilience. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt within the village itself. For years, the disappearance of the children had cast a shadow over the community, leaving behind silence and regret. Now, their story served as a bridge between past and present, connecting generations and reigniting a sense of purpose. Annual vigils held at the edge of the forest drew larger crowds with lanterns lighting up the night sky in honor of the lost orphans. Songs were sung, prayers offered, and stories shared, ensuring that their memory lived on. Though the mystery of their disappearance had been partially unraveled, some questions remained unanswered and perhaps always would. Why hadn't they signaled for help? Could anything have saved them? These uncertainties lingered, a reminder of the fragility of life and the limits of human understanding. But what mattered most was the legacy they left behind, a story of courage, love, and quiet defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. In the end, the 15 orphans weren't just names carved into stone or figures lost to history. They were real people whose lives, though brief, had touched countless others. Their voices echoed through the mountains, carried by the wind and whispered by those who dared to remember. And though the snow continued to fall, blanketing the earth in white, their story remained alive, a beacon of hope shining brightly in the darkness. The legacy of the 15 orphans didn't end with the discovery of the cave. If anything, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that would ensure their story was never forgotten. The transformation of the hidden cavern into a memorial site became a labor of love for the entire village, as well as for people from far beyond its borders. What had once been a place of tragedy and mystery now stood as a testament to resilience, unity, and the indomitable human spirit. It was no longer just a cave. It was a sanctuary of remembrance, a place where visitors could step back in time and connect with the lives of those who had endured unimaginable hardship. The preservation process was meticulous. Experts worked tirelessly to stabilize the fragile environment inside the cave, ensuring that the artifacts and carvings remained intact for future generations. Lighting systems were installed discreetly, illuminating the walls without disturbing their authenticity. Walkways made of sturdy yet unobtrusive materials guided visitors through the chambers, allowing them to see the tools, notes, and drawings left behind by the children. Each item was accompanied by plaques explaining its significance, written in simple language so that even young visitors could understand the depth of what they were witnessing. Outside the cave, a visitor center was constructed using sustainable materials to blend harmoniously with the natural surroundings. Inside, exhibits showcased photographs of the orphanage, personal belongings recovered from the site, and replicas of the tools the children had crafted. Interactive displays allowed visitors to learn about survival techniques, ancient rituals, and the psychological aspects of living in isolation. A dedicated section featured letters written by historians, psychologists, and educators, reflecting on the lessons that could be drawn from the orphans' experience. One particularly moving exhibit displayed audio recordings of villagers recounting their memories of the children, stories of laughter, mischief, and kindness that painted vivid portraits of their personalities. Every year, on the anniversary of the children's disappearance, the village hosted a special event called Lantern Night. Hundreds of people gathered at the base of the mountain, carrying lanterns inscribed with messages of hope and gratitude. As dusk fell, the glowing lights formed a river of warmth against the cold darkness, winding its way toward the entrance of the cave. Songs were sung, poems recited, and prayers offered, creating an atmosphere of reverence and celebration. For many attendees, Lantern Night wasn't just a tribute to the past. It was a reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and perseverance in the present. The impact of the memorial extended far beyond tourism. Schools across the region incorporated the story of the 15 orphans into their curricula, teaching students about history, teamwork, and emotional resilience. Teachers used the children's writings and carvings as examples of creativity under pressure, encouraging students to think critically about how they might respond in similar situations. Art classes recreated the cave paintings, while science lessons explored topics like geology, botany, and survival skills inspired by the discoveries. Even gym activities included team-building exercises modeled after the cooperation demonstrated by the orphans. For Sister Marguerite, who had devoted her life to caring for the children, the memorial became a source of profound peace. Though her health continued to decline, she insisted on visiting the site whenever possible, often accompanied by Elena or other volunteers. Sitting in a wheelchair near the entrance, she would watch silently as families and tourists filed in and out, their faces filled with wonder and reflection. Sometimes she shared stories about the children, her voice soft but steady as she described their quirks and dreams. Other times she simply gazed at the mountains, her eyes glistening with tears of both sorrow and gratitude. Before passing away peacefully in her sleep, Sister Marguerite penned a final letter addressed to the world. In it she wrote, "These children taught us more than we ever taught them. They showed us that love can flourish even in the harshest conditions, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, and that home is not a place. It is the bonds we share with those we hold dear. Let their story remind you to cherish every moment, to support one another, and to find light even in the darkest of times." Her words were engraved on a plaque at the entrance of the cave, welcoming visitors with a message of hope and inspiration. As the years passed, the village itself began to heal. New families moved in, drawn by the beauty of the mountains and the sense of purpose fostered by the memorial. Businesses reopened, fields were tilled again, and laughter returned to the streets. While the scars of the past would always remain, they no longer defined the community. Instead, they served as a foundation for growth, a reminder of how far they had come and how much strength they had found together. The story of the 15 orphans also reached audiences worldwide, inspiring books, documentaries, and art projects. Filmmakers captured the haunting beauty of the mountains and the poignancy of the cave's interiors, weaving a narrative that resonated with viewers of all ages. Authors wrote novels based on the children's journey, imagining conversations and moments that hadn't been recorded, but felt true to their spirit. Musicians composed songs that echoed the emotions of loss, hope, and redemption, bringing the tale to life through melody and lyrics. Each adaptation honored the original story while adding layers of interpretation, ensuring that it remained relevant for generations to come. Yet perhaps the most enduring legacy of the 15 orphans was the way they changed how people thought about resilience. Their story challenged conventional notions of success and survival, proving that strength isn't measured by victories or achievements, but by the ability to endure, adapt, and care for one another. They reminded the world that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is power in unity, creativity, and faith. And though their lives ended too soon, their legacy lived on, not as a tragedy, but as a beacon of hope. Today, the mountains still whisper secrets, their peaks shrouded in mist and mystery. But among those whispers, the voices of the 15 orphans echo loudest. They are heard in the laughter of children playing in the village square, in the quiet determination of hikers exploring the trails, and in the hearts of anyone who has ever faced adversity and refused to give up. Their story is etched not only in stone but in the collective memory of humanity, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of existence, light can shine through. And so the mountains stand tall, guardians of a story that will never fade. The 15 orphans may have vanished from sight, but their courage, love, and resilience continue to inspire all who dare to listen.